And they said, 15 years, let's see if we can map the human genome in 15 years. And that would have been, 1990, 2005. Well, it's pretty amazing that they mapped it in 13 years. And it was published a number of times in Nature, but the final analysis came out in 2003. They found out that there was 20,500 genes, 3 billion bases in the human genome. So they mapped one person's genome. How much money do you think it cost? Anyone? Okay, let's just say $1 billion. That's what Facebook paid for Tumblr. I think everybody on Wall Street fell off their chairs. Nope, it cost more. If it was $2 billion, we could have bought a B-2 bomber. That's pretty impressive. It cost $2.7 billion in the 90s, early 2000 for one human genome. And so at that time, for people to think that we could ever bring that to medical care, it was impossible. But what's been amazing is that the cost of genome sequencing has been dropping dramatically. And San Diego is so rich in technology companies. Illumina was really a driver in helping develop the technology. It's called next generation sequencing. And they really help drive the cost down. Moore's law talks about doubling the computing power every year by a couple times and dropping cost. Well, the cost associated with gene sequencing has been dropping at about 5 to 10x. And right now, Illumina offers it on a USB bracelet for about $1,000. And we still have a lot more to drop. And in fact, in San Diego, there's another company, Edico Genome, who just announced a partnership with Intel. And they're doing, I kind of made this up, the next gen sequencing. And I am sure that it'll probably be bought by Illumina, but they're going to help us get it to an amount that I'm going to predict at the end of this presentation, and we'll see by the year 2020 if I'm correct. But there you go. Illumina is putting it on a bracelet. Google, of course, Google's got to be involved, right? Google's got Google Genomics. They're allowing you to sell or to store your sequence in their cloud and be able to allow researchers to use it for research. So there's a lot going on in the storage area. So what good is genomics? How many here are remotely familiar with the world of genomics and what they're doing in medical care? So keep your hands way up. Okay, so there's quite a few. Good. You knew a lot more than I did several years ago. Anyway, so what's good about it is you can use it to treat. You can use it to prevent, cure. It's really been amazing with personalizing medicine. And they're able to take a tumor now and look at the genetic mutations or look at your genetic mutations and match up drugs to help do more effective therapies. We're all probably more familiar with the recent testing of Angelina Jolie, who had the BRCA gene mutation, and she went ahead prophylactically to prevent a potential cancer and had a mastectomy and her ovaries removed. But that's powerful when you think just several years ago, we weren't able to really understand the genetics and what's causing the disease and to have treatments associated with them. So there's a lot going on in that. And then just companion diagnostics, not sure how many people have heard about that, but basically pharma hated it to begin with because companies were developing these diagnostics that said, hey, your drug might not work on these patients, or it might work on them. But then pharma woke up and, as usual, took advantage and started to use companion diagnostics to help enhance their clinical trials, because now they can recruit patients based on genetic data and ensure that it's working on those patients or not working on them. And the FDA is even requiring some pharmacogenomic information on labeling now. And that's an area that's near and dear to me because of my pharmacy background. It's wonderful that we can do something called SNP testing and be able to look at the metabolism of patients to, say, warfarin, an anti-clotting drug, and know what type of dosing to give them. Some of them are faster metabolizers, some of them are slower metabolizers. And then there's something called P4. Anybody heard of P4? Well, there's an amazing man in Seattle by the name of Lee Hood. He's won all kinds of awards. He actually was at Caltech. He was a co-founder of Amgen, which I know we've all heard of. He was recruited by Bill Gates to the University of Washington and was there for a number of years, and then went and started an Institute for Systems Biology, which is a research institute which has spun out a number of companies. And he basically says personalized medicine is all about P4. One, it is predictive. With genetic information we can predict, we can then prevent, we can personalize therapies, and hopefully we can participate in all of that information. And he led a project earlier this year called the 100 Project, and he took 100 subjects and sequenced them all, gave them an activity bracelet, did a bunch of other testing, collected that information, and that was pilot for his vision of doing a program with 100,000 patients. So quite a bit going on in genomics, but what's next in omics, genomics? Well, I think we all probably heard President Obama talk about the Precision Medicine Initiative and giving $215 million toward it. And it was nice to see the government get behind this because they're driving the reform in healthcare, and hopefully this backing will help really spur more research in this. They'd like to make it the norm versus the exception, cheaper, faster. And then genomics is really just the start. And I call this whole branch omics because it took us a while to sequence the human genome, but I think we learned quite a bit and the sequencing came along. And now they're in the process of sequencing the proteome, which is all the proteins in the body, and hopefully that'll be done in just the next couple of years. And then we've got transcriptomics, which is about the RNA part. The DNA tells the RNA how to make the proteins. And then we've got I can't even say it, metabolomics, where we're looking at the metabolites in our body. So there's a lot going on, and just if we look at what was done with the genome, I think by the time they get all of this worked out, it will truly revolutionize healthcare. So before we can revolutionize it, though, we really need the tools to aggregate and analyze all of this genomic information and all the other information that's coming. And so the world of big data, and there's so much that I could talk about on big data, but data is growing. Besides all the genomic information that's out there, we've got the EMR, we've got the wireless, we've got the wearables. Data is coming in all different directions, not only in healthcare, but across all industries. And let me go back here. It's growing at an enormous rate. I was shocked to find out that they say that we've generated 90% of all the data in history in the last 2 years. Pretty mind-boggling. And then when you think about all of the data that's going to be generated going forward. On the wearables, in 2014, there were about 20 million wearables, and they estimate 2018 that'll exceed 100 million. So we'll all be wearing wearables and generating a lot more data. And as I said, it's in all kinds of industries, but tonight I mainly wanted to focus on healthcare. But the investors are here too. VCs in 2013 invested not just in big data, just in wearables, about $500 million, up 80%. Roche, at the beginning of this year, invested $1.3 billion for a majority stake in Foundation Medicine. And I wrote for the data. I mean, Foundation Medicine is all about cancer and genomics, but they're collecting an amazing amount of data, and really the power is in the data. And there's actually growing healthcare coverage for both genomics, and hopefully we'll get it for the wearables in the future. So really what we need to do, there's one thing to get genomic information or this wearable information, but we need a way to put it all together and start to analyze and compare ourselves against everything else that's out there. And it's going to have a profound effect on healthcare. But how can we do it better? Well, I think we've got all this data. We've got some capacity right now to deal with the big data and analyze it. But I truly believe it's artificial intelligence. And I was so glad to be validated by the Wall Street Journal. It's artificial intelligence that's really going to make a difference, because there's only so much that we as humans can compute, and there's only so much that regular computers could do. And artificial intelligence is really about making a computer understand human language, think like a person, make decisions, and learn from those decisions. And then we can all go to sleep. So if we just look back, I love to look back at history, at where we've come from, to learn from it and where we're going. I think we've probably all seen pictures of the UNIVAC. 1951, it was 25 feet by 50 feet. It's hard to believe we're only 60 years down the road, and everyone in this room has experienced the power of these dumb computers. Basically, they handled, mathematical modeling. But IBM, which was a leader in computing, my father actually worked at IBM in the late 50s. So it was kind of fun to do some research and learn a little bit more about what IBM's been doing. In about 2008, 2009, when the world was falling apart, IBM committed $1 billion and said, you know what, we're going to lock up a bunch of people, a bunch of smart people in a room, and we think what we ought to do is take the power of computers and take it to the next level. And that was really artificial intelligence. They wanted to take a computer that really just does mathematical modeling and have it become cognitive, have it understand human language, and have it start to make decisions and start to learn from those decisions. And when I asked people, have you heard about Watson? A lot of people said, no. And then I mentioned Jeopardy, and they're like, yeah, I did hear about that. Well, once they created the supercomputer, IBM said, we ought to test it out. So they said, Jeopardy, give us your 2 champions of the world, and let's see how this computer does against them. And IBM said, we don't know how it'll do, but we'll try it out. Well, I've never really watched a Jeopardy game, but let me tell you, this computer kicked their butt. It had, I think, like $10,000, and maybe they had $2,000. I should have had a picture of that. Anyway, they kind of described it as Surrey on steroids. And this computer was able to do it because it took evidence-based responses. Remember evidence-based medicine? It sounds a little familiar. Evidence-based responses is how they described it, and it used confidence intervals. So what happened was, immediately after this Jeopardy victory in 2011, doctors started to call IBM. And they said, wow, we think we can use that in medicine. And they started to work with IBM. And one of the first institutions that IBM started to work with was with Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, which is a renowned cancer center. They also worked with Cleveland Clinic, MD Anderson, and Anthem Wellpoint. And they started in oncology, and it seems that's where everything seems to start. And as I described at the beginning of this talk, they basically took all the medical literature, the best practices, the textbooks, the expert opinions, put it into Watson and had at it. And what Watson could do, and Watson did this was one of the first things on a glioblastoma brain cancer patient. In 11 minutes, Watson came up with a treatment plan. It took a team of expert doctors 4 weeks to do it. And when you have brain cancer, that's a big delta. So that really just started the journey on Watson being an amazing machine, and just really started to have people imagine what Watson and other artificial intelligence could become. And just in the last 2 weeks, IBM announced partnerships with J&J, Apple, and Medtronic in the IT side of things with Watson. So there's a lot going on with IBM, and not just IBM. Wall Street Journal article was talking about Google, Amazon, Microsoft, all getting involved in recruiting people, a lot of them out of University of Washington, really across the country, on artificial intelligence. So Watson's shrinking. Watson started out about the size of a bedroom, and now Watson's down to about 3 stacked pizza boxes. So I'm sure by 2020 it'll be on our wrist. And the great thing is Watson's available in the cloud. It can process about 500 gigs, or the equivalent of 1 million books, in a second. I'd hate to even try to compete with that. Also, cross-reference the symptoms of about 1 million cancer patients in 15 seconds and can give a treatment plan. It does like reading and summarizing, so it can take notes that doctors have put into an EMR, non-mathematical things, and it can understand them. It can basically scan a whole EMR record of a patient and give a doctor a 1-page summary. And you know, doctors don't have a lot of time to go through medical records. They're making all kinds of errors by not knowing drug interactions, not knowing previous treatment. So I really believe that in the future, Watson or artificial intelligence will help drive the diagnosis and the treatment plans across all disease states. And that dare to imagine will really come true. And it's already coming true in oncology. So Watson needs a partner, right? Isabel. Isabel and Watson are probably going to get married. Isabel is a decision-based tool. It's a company out of London, and it started as a diagnostic decision-based tool to help physicians, and now it's in an app. And basically, patients, doctors are going to love this, we can go and put in layman's terms our symptoms, and it will come up with a series of diagnoses and allow us to look at all the tests and other information associated with those diagnoses. And it can do treatment by age, gender, your travel history. It can send it to your email the information to your doctor. So I think Watson really needs Isabel. Okay, so to wrap up, I'm going to make 5 predictions tonight. And maybe if I'm correct, Joe will have me back in 5 years. We'll see. So remember I told you that first human genome, $3 billion. It's now somewhere between $1,000 and $5,000. I think by 2020, it's going to be about $50 or less. Right now, they've only sequenced about 228,000 human genomes. Illumina is saying by the year 2017, it'll be 1.6 million. I think they're really underestimating, and I'm going to say 10 million by the year 2020. Next, all of omics will be sequenced. So I told you that they're working on proteomics, maybe a couple years away. We'll get metabolomics, we'll get the RNA transcript omics, and really be able to put those together, because a lot of people believe it's not just in the genes. You've got to look at the gene expression in RNA. You've got to look at the proteins. I'm fortunate enough to be CEO of Provincio, where we're looking at multiple protein algorithmic analysis tests to help rule out obstructive coronary artery disease. I hope I'm wrong when I say it's probably a combination of everything, because we're only looking at proteins now. Next, we're going to have a fully connected cloud-based healthcare system. And last, artificial intelligence will be driving the diagnosis, the treatment plans, and everything. It'll be doctor's right hand. And that's all I have for you tonight.
Do you have some questions for Rhonda? Because I have a half dozen. I'll go first then. Hey, Rhonda.
Yes.
So, as a small to mid-sized medical device company, you got bought out by a pretty nice multiple. How'd you do that, and what can folks with small to mid-sized medical device companies learn from your experience?
Have a great analyst like Jeff Cross. You know, what I really learned was so much of life is networking and who you know. And that's why it's great you're all here. Cardiodynamics was really small. We were research stage. But because the angel investor was Alan Paulson, he knew people. He was able, even though he could have funded us all himself, he got friends involved who had friends. He got analyst coverage from companies that we shouldn't have had analyst coverage from. I say shouldn't have because we were so small, we were so unknown. But again, it came back to the power of who's associated with your company. And I've looked at that even in terms of partnerships. Now I know so many more people than I did back then, and I see the importance of being connected. And I'm connecting with people right now who are in line to possibly buy the company I'm with. So it's never too early to really be out there and meeting people and looking way down the road. Look at your end game. And even if you're early on, like I always felt most of the companies were way ahead of the curve, there are people out there who can help you get sold, get the coverage, and get the exposure that you need. Think big.
So I read your book cover to cover, even though it's
Joe wants me to talk about myself, and I really don't like to.
just a little. I don't know, 40% of this audience is female. What advice would you give them about how you broke through the glass ceiling, became CEO? I read a little excerpt about some of the challenges you had along the way. Perhaps a nugget or two that you could share.
I think this applies to everyone, but it applies a little bit more to women. Fear not. Truly don't have fear. And deep down, we all have a certain amount of insecurity and a certain amount of fear. But guys, they would never tell the world that they're fearful or they couldn't do something or they haven't done it. They just go out and do it. And I think women, they'll talk about their fear. They won't take jobs because of their fear, because of risk. So 1, fear not. 2, persevere. Don't give up. At Cardiodynamics, one of the stories we love to tell is early on, we had an opportunity to partner with General Electric. It wasn't called GE Medical Systems then. I don't know what it was called then, but anyway, it was 1999. I was the president of the company, traveling with the CEO. We had a meeting with GE, and they called that morning and said, we're not having the meeting. It's canceled. Left a voicemail. We didn't get the message. We did. We got the message, but I said we didn't get the message, and we went, and we ended up getting a partnership with GE, because there are just times when you don't hear the wrong information, and you persevere through it. And it was an interesting process, but I always say, people say no until you give them enough information to say yes. So fear not, persevere. And the last piece of advice, have lots of money, lots of partners, exit as soon as you can. Because we all know in this world, you never know. We were held up as a model company by Medicare, and from that day forward, it was kind of like a marriage. I heard a joke recently. A woman thinks a guy is great until the day she marries him, and then she spends the rest of her life transforming him, or changing him. Well, Medicare spent the rest of their life after holding us up as a model company, cutting away at our reimbursement. So exit as soon as you can.
Quite a few folks in this room need money badly because they have a great innovation. And where's the money? I know you're going to talk about it a bit, Jeff. And Rick, are you in the room? There he is. Rick Barron's here. Rick is the former CFO of Globus Medical, and in 2012, he was one of 4 IPOs for the medical device category. That deserves a round of applause. So he'll get the question too, but what did you tell me over lunch about where do you start? What do you do? How do you make it happen?
First of all, raise more money than you ever think you'll need, because we all know it takes probably 5 times as much money and 5 times as long to do whatever you're going to do. So that's easy for me to say, raise more money than you think you'll need, because a lot of you may be out there just saying, hey, I'll take my first $1 million. Again, I'll say it goes back to who you know. Cardiodynamics and culture technology, the principles behind it had money, and they knew people who had money. But there gets a point in your career where you're supposed to be the one that has those contacts. And so really it's going out and meeting as many people as you can, learning from them, asking how you got the money. A lot of times it's starting with angel investors in your C round, maybe even your A round. I always say keep the VCs out as long as you can. Be friends with analysts. I hadn't seen Jeff Cross in Lord knows how long, but you know what? He came up to me tonight and I was like, oh my goodness. So I should have been in touch with him. Thank goodness I've had access to money for Provincio, and I'm very, very grateful, but there will come a time when I need to get more institutional funds in, possibly even VC money in, and he's a great person to know. So I think Jeff is speaking with you tonight, and another gentleman in the back, maybe not tonight, but over the course of this conference. But anyway, raise as much as you can, and again, through networking, do that. There's wonderful money to be had in partnerships. And I just say to you, be out at your industry conferences and meeting as many companies as you can. And what we talked about tonight, really be forward-looking. These big companies have strategic initiatives that aren't advertised, but you can be fortunate to be a part of what they're looking at as a strategic initiative. And they'll do some amazing development partnerships, sales, marketing opportunities, and acquisitions that, you know, if you're the right company at the right time, it'll happen. My former CEO of Cardiodynamics was started a company, Crisis Medical, and in 2010, right after Cardiodynamics sold, he started as CEO there. I shouldn't say he started, because it was in a very embryonic stage when he took over, but less than 5 years. In January of this year, BD, Becton Dickinson, bought them. And it all started about 3 years ago when BD had an initiative on patient safety. They had a product in development. BD gave them all kinds of non-dilutive funding and then dilutive to develop it, have the rights for distribution, but really what they wanted all along was to acquire them, and it was sold. So kudos to San Diego. You guys have got amazing companies here that have done very well. Some have had challenges, but A number have done very well. And one of the things I love about Seattle is it's young, but it's a very dynamic, collaborative environment, and they've got a lot of exciting things going on, especially in oncology and now some in proteomics.